This happened just a few weeks ago. I'm a high school senior living in Nevada, a place where the dust settles deep and forgotten things tend to stay that way. There's not much to do out here, but my friends and I, we chase decay. Urban explorers, I guess you'd call us. Abandoned buildings, hollowed out malls, busted up tunnels. Anything that time had turned its back on. Charles was always the one dragging us into the most bizarre places. Real quiet dude, never shared much, especially not how he found half the spots he did. One day, he messaged us a screenshot from some sketchy Instagram page with barely any followers, grainy pics that looked like stills from a nightmare, and creepy comments like, "It watches," and "Don't go alone." The post said something vague like, "Dozens of forgotten mine shafts scattered in the Mojave if you know where to look." Charles was already obsessed. That Saturday, it was just me, Charles, and James. I had my Jeep built for this kind of terrain, so we loaded up and headed toward the middle of the desert with nothing but a vague location and a dropped pin on Charles's offline map. We drove for what felt like hours. Once we left the main road, even the path we were on barely passed for a trail. No signs, no buildings, not even a power line in sight. Just sun-bleached dirt and a silence that felt heavier than normal. James, who sat grumbling in the back, was getting real annoyed, swearing Charles had gotten duped by some internet troll. But Charles insisted we were close. He always was a bit stubborn like that. Just as we were about to call it a bust, James pointed to something half buried in the slope ahead. It looked like a pile of debris, at first sunken wood and crumbled stone, but as we got closer, we saw it. A rotting wooden frame poking out of the hillside, partially caved in, but behind it a hole, gaping and black as night. It was definitely a mine shaft. Charles didn't say a word, just pulled out his phone, dropped a pin on the location, and shot James a smug grin. Even I had to admit, the guy had pulled off a miracle finding this place. We parked just off the side of the slope and geared up. Charles even brought those filtered masks, probably expecting the air inside to be rank. As we stood at the entrance, he picked up a rock and tossed it in. We waited. 1, 2, 3 metallic bounces, then nothing. It was deep. "Trip down there and you're done," he muttered. We started our descent. Luckily, the shaft sloped rather than dropped, so we didn't need ropes, just slow, steady footing. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The sound of the surface wind, birds, even our own footsteps all disappeared, replaced by this stillness that pressed into your ears. By the time we reached the bottom, there was no light left. Just tunnel after tunnel splitting off in different directions, with old support beams creaking above us and rusted rails snaking through the dirt. The air was thick and stale masks were suddenly a godsend. We didn't have a goal. We were just exploring. We picked a tunnel and started walking. About 10 minutes in, we heard it, something being dragged, faint but steady. At first, I thought my ears were playing tricks, but I saw Charles freeze. James mouthed for us to kill our flashlights. We did. Darkness swallowed everything. We just stood there, barely breathing. The noise came again, a scraping sound, like metal or maybe old wood scraping across stone. The acoustics made it impossible to tell how far it was, but it was getting closer. No footsteps, no voices, just that sickening scrape. Then James, in the worst timing possible, fumbled his flashlight and flicked it on for half a second. The scraping stopped. We didn't even have time to react. From somewhere deeper in the mine came this deafening, metallic crash, like something huge had been dropped. Then a scream. I can't describe it. It was guttural, not quite human, something you feel in your chest before your ears even register it. We ran, no hesitation. I could hear the thing, whatever it was, behind us. Not chasing, exactly, but moving, and fast. I was last in the group, and adrenaline was the only thing keeping me upright. Then my foot caught on something. I went down hard, my shoe ripped clean off. I didn't stop to grab it. I couldn't. Up ahead, James and Charles were already climbing the slope. I dragged myself up on hands and one bare foot, splinters biting deep into my skin with every step. I swear I felt a warm breath on the back of my neck. When we burst out into the daylight, I collapsed. My foot was shredded. James had to jump into the driver's seat and slam the gas while Charles helped me into the back. We didn't say a word until we hit the hospital. Later, after the stitches and the tetanus shot, we tried to move on. But a few days later, James remembered something. He'd lost his wallet probably near the entrance while helping me. Against our better judgment, we went back, just to the mouth of mine. His wallet was gone, but my shoe? It was there, sitting right where I fell. Not just scuffed or ripped chewed. There were teeth marks, human-sized. but way too deep, like something with far too many teeth and too much jaw strength had tried to bite right through it. We didn't go back after that. We don't talk about it much now either, but sometimes I'll open Charles's offline map and stare at the pin he dropped, and wonder what the hell we nearly woke up down there. I've always been the type who finds peace in places most people avoid: deep woods, remote lakes, rugged mountains. For me, a vacation doesn't mean beaches or hotels. It means silence, open skies, and being off the grid. My girlfriend, Tiki, shares that love for the wild. It's one of the reasons we clicked so fast. A few weeks ago, we decided to try something we'd never done before: desert camping. We'd done everything else: forests, cliffsides, rivers. But there was something about the emptiness of the desert, the heat, the isolation, the stillness that felt like a different kind of adventure. One major draw? The stars. Out in the desert, with no towns for miles, the sky is a galaxy laid bare. Back when we first met, we used to drive out past the edge of town just to lie on the hood of my truck and watch meteor showers. This felt like a bigger version of that. I found a site online that claimed to be legal for primitive camping. No bathrooms, no cabins, just a ring of stones for fires and miles of open land. It sounded perfect. We left early Friday morning and reached the site after a 3-hour drive. The last hour was nothing but a dusty trail through a landscape so dry it felt ancient. Not a person in sight. Exactly what we were hoping for. The first 2 nights were incredible. Warm days, cool evenings, a fire crackling under a dome of stars. We'd sit with a drink in hand, pass a joint back and forth, talk about nothing and everything. Just breathe. No service, no stress, just us. But both nights, around the same hour, we heard something strange in the distance. It was faint, almost like a long, hollow wail. Not quite human, but not entirely animal either. Somewhere between a moan and a howl, far off just enough to unsettle you. We chalked it up to the wildlife. Maybe a coyote, maybe the wind is playing tricks. We laughed it off. Tiki was a little creeped out, but we both agreed it's nature. Nature makes weird noises. The third night changed everything. I woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of footsteps outside the tent. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. Just a couple soft crunches on the dry dirt, slow, deliberate. My eyes shot open. No more footsteps, just silence. My body froze. I didn't dare move. Every hair on my body stood on end, and my ears strained in the darkness. This wasn't a rabbit or some desert critter. This was someone walking on 2 feet. Whoever it was stopped just a few feet from the tent. I waited. The seconds dragged on like hours. No breathing, no shifting, just stillness. Then a click. That sharp metallic sound. A lighter. A tiny orange flame appeared, flickering just outside the tent wall. My breath caught in my throat as the flame hovered for a second, then began to sway. Slowly, side to side. And then the fire grew. The flicker became a glow. Something had been lit. Maybe a torch? Whatever it was, the heat hit fast. And suddenly the fabric of the tent lit up like it had been soaked in gasoline. That's what snapped me out of it. I shoved Tiki awake, yelling that we had to move. She understood immediately: the heat, the glow, the smoke curling in. We started grabbing everything we could and tossing it outside. I don't even know what we managed to save. The fire was spreading. Tiki grabbed one of our water jugs and doused the flames while I stomped out what I could. Finally, we got the fire under control, but half the tent was torched. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the desert around us. No one, nothing but dark silence. Tiki had already started throwing our gear together, and I followed her lead. We didn't talk, just packed. Survival mode. We had no trail markers, no signs, just our memory of the way we came. We picked a direction and started walking fast, hoping we weren't getting more lost with each step. And then it started again, that sound. But this time, it wasn't far. It was close, and louder. That same eerie wailing we'd heard the nights before, but it didn't stop this time. It stretched on, like something was in pain or calling out. Then came another scream, from a different direction. And another. There were multiple sources now, all behind us. We didn't wait to find out how many. I grabbed Tiki's arm, and we ran. By some miracle, we stumbled onto the truck. I don't even remember how. Just the pure luck of panic and adrenaline. We threw our stuff in and took off, tires spinning against the dirt. I couldn't drive too fast. The road was too rough, but I pushed it as much as I could. The high beams were our only protection, cutting through the dark like a blade. It felt like forever before we reached the highway. When we did, I didn't slow down until we saw headlights from another car. Tiki was holding it together, but her hands were shaking. Mine were too. We reported it to the police. Every detail, the fire, the sounds, the stranger with the lighter. They filed a report, but I could tell they didn't believe us. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd been a heavier sleeper. If we hadn't woken up in time. If the fire had spread faster. There's something out there in that desert. Something that waits in silence until night falls. And I have a sick feeling we weren't the first ones it tried to burn alive. Before I get into what happened, there's something you need to know about my mom. She's always been guarded. Not paranoid exactly, just strangely quiet when it comes to her past. She grew up in northern Mexico, in some small border town, the kind of place most people try to leave and never look back. She came to the US alone in her early 20s to study, met my dad, built a life here, but the version of herself before all that? It's like it doesn't exist. Ask her about it, and she'll either laugh it off or change the subject like it never happened. I used to think it was just some trauma she didn't want to relive. My dad said as much when I was a kid, but the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't just pain she was hiding. It was something else. Something intentional. The few details I've managed to scrape together are vague at best. Her father, from what I've gathered, worked in some kind of government role. She never said what he did exactly. And her mother? Never spoken of, not once. The only time she ever referenced her family was through a joke she used to tell. Her father's side were the officials, and her mother's were the criminals, but she could never tell which side was worse. It used to make me laugh. Now it sends a chill down my spine. There was one name she mentioned once, when she didn't know I was listening. I was maybe 10 or 11. I'd gotten up late one night to use the bathroom, and I heard her in the living room, whispering in Spanish. I couldn't understand the words, but she kept saying a name. Let's just call him R. Over and over, like she was talking about him, not to him. It was dark, all the lights were off, but I flipped the switch without thinking. She didn't flinch. It was like she expected me. She ended the call instantly and gave me a stare that I can still picture today, a look that said, "You weren't supposed to hear that." She told me to go back to bed. I did. That's all I knew. Until a year ago, I was driving through the Arizona desert, heading to meet up with an old college buddy. It was a long, lonely stretch of road, hours of nothing but sand, brush, and the occasional lizard darting across the asphalt. I'd run out of music, wasn't in the mood for podcasts, so I started calling people, old flings. Eventually, I rang up my mom. We chatted about soccer like we always did, Champions League, predictions, players. It was normal, until I saw two pickup trucks up ahead blocking the road. I slowed down. There was no crash, no hazard signs, just two vehicles angled across the road like they were waiting. My mom was still on the phone. I hadn't said anything yet. I stopped the car. My stomach sank. 3 men stepped out, all armed, all walking toward me. Before I could react, I noticed another vehicle closing in from behind. I was boxed in, unarmed, and completely alone. One of the men tapped his gun against my window and motioned for me to get out. The others stood back watching. I raised my hands, heart pounding, and stepped out slowly. They spoke to me in Spanish, barking orders, demanding something, but I couldn't respond. I never learned the language. It was always a sore spot for me, being Mexican-American but never truly bilingual. But right then, it felt like a fatal flaw. They emptied my pockets, wallet, phone, keys, everything. One of them climbed into my truck. That's when something strange happened. The man in the driver's seat didn't turn off the ignition. He didn't hang up the call. My mom was still on the line. He stared at the screen for a second, then brought the phone to his ear. He started listening, then talking. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew exactly what was happening. My mom was speaking to him, and whatever she said, he knew her. I saw his lips moving. I watched as he repeated something. I'm almost certain it was R, just like the one she used that night all those years ago. Soon, the others gathered around the truck, listening too. The man inside rolled down the window, said something, then all 3 of them turned and stared at me. There was a long pause. Then they walked back over. One of them handed me my stuff. All of it. Keys, phone, even my backpack. The only thing they kept was the cash from my wallet. As he handed it back, he smiled this cold, knowing grin and said, in a heavy accent, "Tax." I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I just got in the truck and drove. As I pulled away, all 3 trucks peeled off into the desert in different directions. None of them had license plates, no identifiers, nothing. Once I was safely back on the road, I called my mom again. I needed answers. She claimed she tracked my location and threatened to call the cops if they got scared off. I knew that was a lie. I told her so. She stuck to her story. I pushed. I demanded the truth. Asked who I was, what she said to them, why they listened. She didn't budge. We hung up, and I finished the drive in silence. I tried to forget it. I really did. But lately, it's been gnawing at me. The way she handled that call, the way they reacted. My mom isn't just hiding trauma. She's hiding connections. Powerful ones. Dangerous ones. And I think those ties never broke. Not even when she left Mexico. I don't know if I'm ready to hear the truth, but I'm even more terrified of what happens if I never ask. That was another true story. If you're still watching, you're one of the brave ones. Most don't make it this far. Subscribe to Horror Stories and hit the bell because the next horror stories drop soon. Stay scared. Stay safe. We'll see you in the dark.